My name is Leah, and I am a developer evangelist at GE Digital, and I am based in San Ramon, California. And I hope you're excited because we're going to go on a journey today from data to insights, and it's going to be all about rapid application development using our Predix Studio product. The journey today is going to consist of a few stops. First, we're going to go through an introduction to industrial IoT development. Then we're going to talk about Predix Studio and what it actually is. We're going to go through a couple of case studies about uses of Predix Studio, and then we will actually do a demo live and in the flesh, which is very exciting. So I'm just trying to figure out where my cursor is. Sorry, the double monitors. Okay, so industrial application development. Say you're on a team and you need to build some kind of industrial application. You have a lot of choices for the tools that are out there. And those tools all fall somewhere along this spectrum, from high control to high productivity. So what does that mean? A high control set of tools offers you and your team a lot of flexibility to stitch together the various pieces to build your application. You have a lot of choices for your data stores, for your application logic, for the visualization. It's usually done using microservices. And some good examples of high control environments are things like AWS and Azure. We also offer a high control Predix environment. On the other end of the spectrum here, we have high productivity tools. Now, high productivity tools are tools in which some of the technical decisions have been made for you. You're more focused on leveraging the data to compose applications and reducing that complexity, but in turn, the trade-off is you're limited with some of that flexibility and control that you have in the high control environment. An example of that is IQP, which is an application that lets you drag and drop to build visualizations for data stuff. For reference, high control environments are typically marketed towards the traditional, for lack of a better word, software developer. Someone who has that background in programming, who's like in a team where you're sitting behind the computer to build that application. Whereas the high productivity environment is marketed towards what we call the citizen developer. Now I want you to remember the citizen developer because they're an important player in today's story. The citizen developer is someone who might not have that background in software engineering or software development, but who has an incredible amount of domain knowledge and subject matter expertise in their particular industry. And they want to get the insights from that data in whatever manner possible without having to go back to school to get another degree or get a nano degree online or have a whole team. They want to be able to get those insights as soon as possible. So what we're going to talk about today is Predix Studio. And Studio falls actually somewhere in the middle, and it's not the only tool that does too. Studio falls kind of around here in the scale. So it's on the high productivity side because it's what we call a low code environment. It's not no code because you do have some coding in there to offer some customizability, but it's not the high control environment that we talked about over here. So refresher, that high control environment, lots of options, customization, needs a lot of technical knowledge. And on the other side, you have that high productivity where some of those decisions have been made for you. You don't have as much flexibility, but can get that data in and visualizing faster. And the citizen developer, that domain knowledge and subject matter expertise. So why do we care about all of this? Why should you use a high productivity app like Predix Studio even? The thing is that one application to address them all isn't feasible. Like the market is moving too quickly and there are a lot of challenges right now. And Gartner showed a couple of years ago, and this still remains true, that something like 75% of IoT projects are taking twice as long as they should. And why are these IoT use cases so complex, especially in the industrial sector? I can tell you that in the industrial IoT sector, what makes them so complex is that there's just so much and so many of everything. There's so many microservices, so many data sources, so much data, so many restrictions. Let me paint a picture for you. Let's pretend that we have an airline and we want to get some information about the airplanes so that we can make better business decisions, make sure that they're maintained, and make sure we have a safe running fleet for our passengers. If we were living 10 years ago, our planes would be producing data from 30 parameters every flight, and we would take 3 snapshots of that data during the flight, during takeoff, once we hit cruising, and once we land. This would generate about a kilobyte of data total, which is very small by today's standards, in case you weren't sure. Today, if we want to be that airline manager, we're capturing something like 5,000 parameters per flight, and we're capturing those parameters once a second. And that means something like 500 gigabytes of data per flight minimum, although realistically, it's usually more than that. I know a jet engine generates, one of our jet engines generates a terabyte of data in a flight from New York to Los Angeles. And if you think about how a plane has 2 engines, or if you're managing an airline, I mean, you have 500 gigabytes minimum, 5,000 parameters, a snapshot per second. If you're thinking about multiple airlines, it's a lot of flights. So it's understandable that the #1 app development challenge for industrial orgs is data integration. Gartner's does an awesome research that's shown that 80% of data analytics project time has to do with data integration. How do you get all of that data into your project? And I mean, if we think about it, they also show that they often come in 50% over budget. And if you think about it, it's not just data from those planes that's coming in. We probably want to know about the weather data on the airports from takeoff and landing, and maybe the weather that was along the way, and you're going to want geographic data. So chances are it's not just those terabytes of petabytes of data coming from the planes themselves, but also from these other disparate data sources that are on the ground. This is where we need our knight in shining armor, and that is Predix Studio. Predix Studio is a low-code, rapid application development and extension tool for industrial IoT use cases. The reason why it's low-code and not no-code is because these industrial use cases are really complex, and so having that low-code option gives customers and partners and users flexibility to power their applications and tailor them to their particular needs. So if you're using Predix Studio, it follows a pretty easy recipe. You have your automated data integration here, which accelerates time to value. So it automates getting that data in from the outside sources. There are tools to help citizen developers, remember those characters from the beginning, rapidly build their applications using low-code app composition techniques. And then they're easy to deploy because Predix Studio features a whole host of software lifecycle management tools like version control and CI/CD, so that you're not just building these applications and having them sit, you actually have the realistic tools that you need to build those applications. There's a little preview of some of the screens, but we'll get a better look a little later on. Just to give you an idea of how Predix fits into the GE world, Predix is the foundation for APM and other applications. APM stands for Asset Performance Management, and it's one of the key products we have at GE Digital. And Asset Performance Management is a remote monitoring and diagnostics tool. It's built on top of Predix, that allows you to connect your assets. It ingests data about their performance and runs predictive analytics on it, on the data, and then generates alerts from those data. And from those alerts, a user can take a look, see what's going on, and choose to generate a case from that and like send a tech out to service something. However, that's just the foundation, the base of APM. Where Studio comes in is it gives customers the options to extend APM by building new visualizations on that additional base model. So say they don't need, or they want something in addition to the case management, they can build another screen for that. Or if you have your remote monitoring and diagnostics for your machines, but you want to have something else analyzing that complements APM, you can also build it with Studio there. Let's actually give an example to better understand what's going on here. I'd like to introduce you to Chris. So Chris is a real guy. This is Chris here in the picture. And Chris's background actually is in power systems engineering. And Chris did actually build this application in less than a day, which is really awesome. So Chris came in and he did not know Mix, which is the language that is used in Predix Studio to do that low-code customization. But he learned it and he built this application to show historic power outages for a major power company in the US. He took data from a bunch of different data sources, including weather data. You can see here, this is IDs of some storms in the area. He has information about substations, and so these are our grid. Information about causes of outages, so you have things like humans caused it, wildlife, weather, tree has its own category. These are pretty cool if you drill down. Okay, yeah, so outage causes, weather data, substation info, yep, those are the data sources across the entire grid, and then is able to build these visualizations that show key KPIs for the power sector. Two of the ones in the top, these ones that are numbers, while they're not as colorful as the ones down here, these are two of the most powerful metrics to someone in the power sector. You have the SAFE, which is the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, and that is for a given subset of customers and for a given amount of time, how many outages those customers should expect. On the right, we have the CAIDI, which is the Customer Average Interruption Duration Index, and that is for a given power outage, for a given customer, this is on average how long that outage is going to last. So if I were working for this power company, my goal looking at this screen is I want those numbers to be as low as possible. And from this information from historic outage analysis, I can potentially gain some insight as to why these numbers are higher than they should be. And maybe it's one of the substations in particular is problematic, or maybe it was this one storm and I don't really need to worry, it was just a freak accident, or maybe we really have a tree problem and we need to send a crew out to clear things out. That's one example of someone who's a citizen developer, that's Chris, our citizen developer, using Studio in the wild. Another example that is one of my favorites is about our Dive team. They're the data integration and visualization for the enterprise team. And they took our very first Predix Studio training in April. They, as part of training, got access to a Predix Studio environment. And when you're taking the training, you get access to an environment for 2 weeks. You get it for the week of training and for the week after training. So the training team, after the Dive team came and went, was doing their normal environment decommissioning. And when they were going through the process, they turned off the environment that the Dive team was using. And almost immediately, they got a flurry of emails from this team saying, wait, can you please turn it back on? That we built a prototype and we're thinking of productizing it. It's a working prototype. Can you please bring it back? We want to show it to our customers. And the training team was delighted. So of course they turned it back on because this team went from not knowing Predix Studio at all to having, they came into their training with a project that was, shall we say, troubling. And they got a working prototype in 2 weeks to be able to show their customers. So this was back in April. This is a true story. And I'm very proud to say now that in November, that app is running in a GE power facility in production, which is awesome. So now let's think about how we could use Predix Studio ourselves. We're going to do a little exercise. I'd like to introduce you to another citizen developer who's very intelligent looking. Her name is Leah, and she's a line of business leader. And she wants to see how a recent transaction is processing across her data value chain. So Leah goes through order creation, and already she's got a ton of different data sources that she's dealing with. She's got her Salesforce, her field service management, her manufacturing software, transportation, product lifecycle management. So, okay, she creates that order and data gets populated into her ERP system. And also it goes down to her pricing chain and it goes through all of these. Okay, that's a lot of data sources. And then once it's made it through the pricing cycle, well, then that triggers going to Oracle for the fulfillment and the invoicing. And okay, already we've got like 10 different data systems on the screen. And while, yes, they do talk to each other and trigger things, the thing is that if Leah wants to follow one of these transactions across the whole chain, she's going to have like 15 tabs open in her browser trying to figure out where the thing started and if it actually ended up with the customer when it was supposed to. There are third-party integration tools to pull in data from these visualizations, but a lot of them are really limited by the unique requirements that we have with industrial data. A lot of data sources are very traditional, and they have weird data formatting, unstructured data types, like a lot of odd use cases, not to mention like the kind of volume that we're dealing with earlier. So what Leah needs is our knight in shining armor, Predix Studio, to come. And she needs to follow that recipe for rapid application development. So she's going to start with that automated data integration. So it's going to pull data from those 10 data sources via like secure file transfer, APIs, not APIs, databases, uploading CSVs, you name it. Like there's a way to get that data into Predix Studio. And then we're going to do that AI-driven data ingestion to build an asset model for her. She's going to be able to use the rapid app development environment, that low-code environment, to build visualizations to show her exactly what she wants, and also possibly to show other departments exactly what they want. So what does that look like? Here, Leah has the executive summary that she wants to see. She's got that dashboard showing the transactions going through the different stages, and her other department maybe has a systems overview of what's going on, and the other departments got drill down into each of those different systems and how they are operating. So I think the best way to actually explain this is to show you a demo of that automated data integration for Predix Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that. So here we are looking at Predix Studio. If you were to log in right now, this is what you would see. I'd like to draw your attention to the asset status application here. This was downloaded from what we call the Predix Studio catalog, which is where you can go and get some pre-made applications. And right now, this is probably the most boring application you're going to see today. I mean, the reason why it's boring is because it has no data in it. What good is an application that has no data? If you're curious, if you wanted to, you can add all kinds of visual indicators here. And you see this is your no-code environment for the addition of the indicators. You can move them around if you'd like. And the low-code comes into play if you want to do any kind of customization with some of them. But what we're going to do is we're going to turn this application, instead of being the most boring application in the world, to being an application that actually provides us insights. So we're going to go from data to insights. So we're going to head over to what's called the Data Management Workbench, and I'm going to open up the project that we're going to use for this Global IoT with the Best project. And where we start is we end up on the project configuration page. If you have a background in data science, you might be interested in looking at the options here. This is where we configure the various AI, machine learning, data mining, statistical algorithms that are in here, how they're weighted, and all kinds of coefficients. And so you have the flexibility to customize them if need be. I have had someone with a stronger data science background than I customize it already, and I'm happy with those default values. So I'm going to move on to the source page, which is where I'm going to add the data sources for the day. Since right now we're going to the Data Management Workbench to build an asset model, I'm just pulling from CSVs, but as I said earlier, you can configure Studio so that it's talking to dynamic data sources. So I'm going to pull this asset, service location, usage point, and work order. And I should tell you that these data sources are from a real customer of ours, and they represent smart meters. So they're coming from the power sector. And we have data about the smart meters themselves, some geographic data, some GIS data about the service location and the usage point. And then we have some field services work order data from a work order management service. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Explore. And this is where the magic happens. This is my favorite part of the Data Management Workbench. We're going to start by clicking Learn Entities. And this is where Studio is going through these 4 data sources and taking a look at the shape of them. It's taking a look at what fields are there, what types they are, looking for those primary keys. And you see once it's done, it turns green. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit verify keys, where it's taking a look at the unique keys that it found, and it's going to assign a confidence score. Like most things in life, we love it when it's more confident, and that's true in mathematics as well. Anything higher than an 80 is a pretty good confidence score, and you can see here they're all quite high, which is very nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and click Learn Connections, and this is where like the major magic of all of the magic is happening. This is where it's taking a look at these data sources and figuring out how they relate to one another. You can see it populated this table at the bottom. You can see things like parent and child cardinality. It's letting you know if relationships are one-to-one or one-to-many, all kinds of counts and coefficients that you can explore and filter more deeply if you want to. And then once you are satisfied with the connections that are here, oh, also I should note that if you did want to remove a connection because you believed it was an error, you do have the option to do that. I'm not going to because I'm happy with these connections. And because of that, I'm going to go ahead and hit Train Classifier. This is me investing in my future. I know that this model is the way I want it to be. So if I were to come in with another bunch of data sets in the future and they look very similar to this and I had removed this connection, that's teaching the machine that I want that connection removed in the future. It's making the machine even smarter. So, okay, we can look at these connections this way, but I think the better way to envision how our data sources relate to one another is by clicking on this Visualize tab right here. So here, this is one of my favorite views. You can see we have those 4 different data sources. We have that work order data set, the usage point, the assets, and the service location. And these bars in between them represent how they map to one another. So if you actually click on them, we can drill down to exactly what fields, oops, I'm gonna make it easier to see, Studio has decided are related to one another and why. And this is yet another opportunity for us to train the machine to do that, what's called supervised learning. We could remove any connections if we felt that they were in error. I have on good faith that these are connections that I want to be there, so I'm going to keep them there. Close all this up, and since I'm happy with these connections, I am going to save them. And then once that's ready, this will turn green at the top, and we can move on to the publish stage. So now, in this visualization stage, we saw how they were all related to each other. And now in this publish stage, we see the asset model that we've just built. No longer do we have these 4 disparate data sources. We have this one unified data model. And we want to save this so that we can use it in the future. This would be an opportunity if I looked through this and I saw that the name of something was incorrect, or if I was like, no, the manufacturer is always an integer, it's not a string. You can go through and make edits on things like that right here, because this is just an abstract representation of the data. This is not actually the physical data that's stored. This is our model. I am happy with how everything is listed here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Publish All. And I'm going to publish it to this Global IoT model. I could make a new model if I wanted to. I happen to already have one for our purposes. You can see a couple of the other ones we have floating around. Go ahead and save that. And then we can move on to the ingestion phase. So what we've done so far, just to recap, is in the source file, we brought in our 4 disparate data sources, and then we went through and used our AI-assisted approach to develop an asset model. Then we visualized and supervised the learning of that asset model. And once we were happy with it, we published it. And just another way of thinking about this is that we, in the publish phase, it's kind of like we're making the schema of the database. And now we actually want to get our data into this database. So to do that, we need to let the database know that we're actually coming. So we're going to do a little bit of prep work by creating the storage for that. Then I'm going to select the model that we made. And I want you to notice how all these fields here are blank. So we have our source data is on the left. This is what we found when we went through and looked at the sources, the source type and the fields in it. And then I'm going to go and hit Analyze All, which is going to go through all of those data points. And it's going to map them. Here now, this is populated to our asset model. And then it's going to assign a confidence score to that mapping. So like see in usage point, it had a field called asset ID. And it's like, okay, everything that was under usage point asset ID is now going to be in our model as usage point asset ID. And I'm 89% confident that this is what's going on. Like I said before, the higher the confidence, definitely the better. But anything with an 80 or above, we are pretty happy with. And with a quick scroll through all of here, I don't see anything shockingly low. This is all definitely 80 or above. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Run Adapter. This is going to actually bring that data into Predix Studio, into that data store that we created. That might take a little second. It'll turn green when it has run. Awesome. That looks like it's done. Before we move on, I am going to hit View Adapter because this is a part where I like to take a step back and I like to admire all of this code. This code, this really big long page of code was all just written for me by the computer. This is code that I didn't have to write. Just as a background, I did take data mining and machine learning classes in college. And for me to do some of the algorithms that are running under the hood here, to do homework assignments like that, would take me days to do what the computer just wrote for us in a matter of minutes. So that's very exciting. And I like to say, thank you, computer. But more excitingly, I think we should take a look at that application I showed you at the beginning. So we're going to go over to Predix Apps and then to Asset Status. That was that one where we first started. And it should now be the application that we actually want it to be. An application that actually, for the most part, shows us some data, shows you that this is live. Sorry about that. But we have here these, if you remember, these are smart meters, and we can take a look at all of the data fields that are there. Let's say, okay, Pleasanton is close to my office. Let's see all of the ones that are in Pleasanton. Oh, maybe I did not spell Pleasanton right. We will try Berkeley. Okay, we have all of the meters in Berkeley. Oh, maybe I just want to see the collectors, and you can do all that kind of filtering. You can sort on any of these fields. We have some timelines about their deployment. My personal favorite is you can filter and see them all on a map, which is awesome. So let's see, my office is around here somewhere. Oh, just kidding. It's over here, right where the smart meter is. Then we can zoom in and take a look at any of those meters, which is all pretty great. And so with that, I'm going to jump back to the presentation and give you a recap. Remember, we have a lot of struggles in industrial application development, but if we follow our winning recipe for app success, we go through and we integrate the data, we build that application in the low-code environment, which, just for reference, the application that was built today, I believe it took someone a matter of hours to build, probably no more than a day, and we just populated it with data. We can extend that application. And then because we have accelerated our time to value by reducing that development time by at least 50%, we have so much time left over to celebrate, go out and eat lunch outside instead of at our desks, celebrate all kinds of things that come with a healthy quality of life, and also save time and money and make excellent applications. With that, that is what I have today, and I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. Please put them in the box. Otherwise, I'd love for you to keep up with me on Twitter at Leah E. Cole. It was delightful talking with you today. So we have a question that's, can we pull the data in real time? Yes. So the reason why we did not do that today, and I pulled in from CSVs, was to train the model about the shape of our data. In real life, a lot of times, well, no, in real life, pretty much exclusively, you want your application to be pulling from live data sources, and we can configure any application built in Predix Studio to be pulling from all kinds of data sources via REST calls, APIs. Like, if you can imagine it, Studio can connect to it. We just use the CSVs as training data, to make that initial asset model. Yes, we can write business rules. So if you have, the question was, can we write business rules with interdependencies? You definitely can write business rules. There's a whole section on business rules that I'm actually in the process of learning right now because Predix Studio is very new to me as well. And so if your data isn't exactly the way you want it to be, you can write all kinds of business rules to dictate how it should be transformed. You can do that as part of the data management workbench that I showed you today, but you can also do that to build that asset model, but you can also do that outside of the data management workbench. You can build rules that you route your data through before it populates wherever it's going. I do not have access to an environment with dashboards pulled up right now, but I can come back to the screen. Let's see, the question was, could you please show some dashboards? We have this one here. I know it's kind of small. This is a basic overview. That was one of the landing pages for the power use case where they were pulling in data from different data sources. This is live data feeds where they have like their ERP system and their pricing tool, their sales force, their manufacturing, everything. And then what I was showing you over here, this is an example of one of the kinds of dashboards you could build. This is a little bit simpler because it's pointed to static data, but the opportunities are pretty vast for the different types of indicators that are available. There's a comment that I hope the alerts based on the events or the threshold can be defined, and that is absolutely true. If this is regarding, with Predix Studio, you have the flexibility to build your application as you want it, but if this is regarding that application I talked about, asset performance management, I can actually give you a couple of use cases. I know one of the first ones that I used to work on asset performance management, and one of the use cases was, I think it was gas turbines, and they had a very specific threshold for failure, but theirs was very different than we had an aviation use case. And aviation wanted to have actually a lot of false positives. They had I have to figure out if it's a higher or a lower threshold, and I can't think that fast on the fly. But the moral of the story was that they had their instance of APM configured to have a lot of false positives because they would rather have false positives than miss that one positive, than miss a positive that resulted in loss of life. And while obviously in the gas turbine use case as well, they want to prevent danger, but it's for other reasons, they didn't have to keep, the false positives were not as important to them. I think maybe their engines may have been more fault tolerant than jet engines are because those gas turbines are firmly mounted on the ground and are not going to fall out of the sky with a flight full of people if they break. I hear that there are some people here who are new to Predix. I am so glad you could join us today. If you are interested in exploring Predix more, I recommend going to predix.io, and you can sign up for a free account, and there is a lot of good documentation and developer tools for getting started. Studio is not yet in general availability, so if you go there and are looking to play with Studio, I have to say you are not in luck yet. We have it, it's in beta with a couple of our customers now, and we're making sure that it is practically perfect in every way before it goes GA. I also know that I know for a fact because it's part of my job, we have a really great, robust developer community in Predix that has not only those developer tools for getting started, but a very robust forum. There are lots of webinars and video series that we're putting out, and those are all available on predix.io as well. And if you're interested in hearing more about the Predix community, a colleague of mine, Lothar Schubert, is giving a talk tomorrow about that. Predix Studio is still in beta. It is not generally available yet. It will be, I believe it's mid-2018. It's slated to be in GA, but it's in beta with some of our customers right now. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot to offer with Predix as a platform at the moment. Taking a look at the catalog that's on Predix.io to see what services are available. There's a lot of documentation. You can take a look at what's possible there. It's a lot of fun to mess with. Highly recommend.